let's move on to our next guy. So now Servius Tullius is king.
I think it says there's going to be three Etruscans, not Italian.
So he is our second Etruscan king.
Wow.
His origins are debated, whether he's actually Latin or Etruscan. And there's different versions of the story that say it different ways. So that's why the asterisk. Was he actually Etruscan? No idea. But he's called one of the three Etruscan kings. So that's how he's referred to. And here we have our sixth king of Rome. There's the dates that he ruled for. All right, what does he do? Now, notice what he just witnessed. How did he become king? The sons of the previous king killed the current king. So first thing he's going to do is look to the sons of the previous king, and he's got to somehow make sure that they're okay. So one of the first things he does, he happens to have two daughters, and lost his name, previous guy, Tarquin, happened to have two sons. So,
It was Tarquin's kids that killed Tarquin?
no. Ancus Marcius, so we have Ancus, and then we had Tarquin,
What happened to Ancus' sons?
and then we have Servius.
Okay.
I don't know if his sons ended. I mean, since it's recorded, they must have had their plot discovered, and whether they were driven out of the city or killed, I don't know. And if it was said, I forgot. So, but the sons of Ancus were passed on in favor of Tarquin, and so it's the sons of Ancus that plotted the assassination of Tarquin. Servius is not even Tarquin's son. Tarquin has two sons, and yet he was setting Servius up as his heir. And he's doing it at the request of his wife. Imagine you having your own mother say, my boys are great, but that kid, he should be your heir.
That's impressive, honestly.
So, Servius is being selected as the next king over the sons of Tarquin.
So he wants that guy.
So, Servius, he has two daughters. Tarquin, he had two sons. He says, let's put them together. So, he marries Tarquin's two sons to his two daughters, hoping that that will take care of that. Now you're part of the family. Any heirs that continue on will likely come from your bloodline, since I just have daughters. So there we go, trying to deal with the assassination problem. All right. And he goes on fighting now, again, the Etruscans, in particular the city of Veii. If there's one city you want to pick as the enemy of Rome, it's the city of Veii until Carthage enters the scene. So he wins a series of wars against Veii, and he celebrates it with three different triumphs. Absolutely huge deal. They were great victories, won lots of gold, lots of money coming into the city. Those dates were November 25th, 571 BC, May 25th, 567 BC, and BC. The writing where they recorded it isn't legible, so we don't know what the other one was. But they made the BC legible, so we were able to read that. Because they were definitely counting before Christ. Anyways, he's also, in these conquests against Veii, it seems like Rome starts to get control of southern Eretria. They're starting to get control of the northern side of the Tiber River as well as the southern side. The Tiber River's largely been the dividing line. Now that they're winning these victories, they're starting to get a little bit of ground control on the northern side of the Tiber River as well now. That make sense? Go ahead.
Just a question about the dates. They record those. Were they actually recording counting down? Or
These are conversions. They, in their counting system, they counted from the founding of Rome.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, they would not have written it this way. They would not understand that date. Okay. Any other questions so far?
Where's Eretria?
Eretria, that's the name for the Etruscan land. So in other words,
This is across the Tiber River.
yeah, Eretria is where the Etruscans live. And so he's expanding the control, not sure how far, but starting to get a little bit of control on the northern side of the Tiber River.
Yeah.
and giving Rome a foothold there, in particular by winning Veii because it's the biggest Etruscan boy on the block close to Rome. This is one of the 12 Etruscan cities. Okay, any other questions?
They couldn't quite conquer.
Couldn't quite conquer what?
Veii?
Oh no, it would have had just absolutely massive walls, very well fortified, not even going to try. Okay, and then one of the most famous things he did, is he instantiated the census, and he reforms the way that Rome's whole voting system and whole military works. Massive reformation of the Roman government. And the way that they vote, you remember the way that they voted before with the 30 curiae?
Kind of like tribal.
Yeah, there were initially 3 tribes, 10 curiae from each tribe. Each curiae would send 100 people to go vote for whatever they were voting for. Right?
What does instantiated mean?
Sorry, that's a programming term. Made an instance of. Instantiated.
It's like initiated.
Yes.
Uh,
Kind of, but you're creating.
You're creating, yeah. He established the census. Brought it into existence. We're now going to start conducting a census with him.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, before we move on to how these reforms work, we'll go over it. Let's just do the last major thing he did is he constructed what we now refer to as the Servian Walls. And so you see in red there, the Servian Wall. That's its name. It's credited to have been built by him. Some people argue, no, it probably came later, but that's the name that stuck, so everyone calls it the Servian Wall, credited with him. And now, he constructed the Servian Wall around the Urbis Septimontium, which means the city of the 7 hills. From here on out, we can talk about the 7 hills of Rome. And the city with 7 hills, everyone knows what you're talking about. You're talking about Rome. So they now have the 7 hills of Rome. You now have the Servian Wall around Rome. And he also updated the Pomerium to actually coincide with that new Servian Wall. So now that is both the wall around Rome and the actual borders between Rome and the rest of the world, legally. Portions of the Servian Wall are still extant. So here's a picture of them right here. I can't remember the dimensions off the top of my head. I want to say like 22 feet tall and 12 feet wide, something like that. This is one of the initial gates that was in the wall, still extant. This right here, I don't know if you can see it, that's a person. So it gives you a sense of how big the gate was relative to the person.
And then 12 feet wide, like thick.
12 feet thick for the wall.
Wow.
I'm pulling those numbers out of a recollection, could be wrong. But this gives you definitely a picture that shows that. I wish I had a picture with a person standing there to kind of give us a reference point.
Was catapults kind of a thing back then?
There is some siege equipment, but not like catapults, no. It's largely just building up mounds to get over the wall, and you try building it up, and they're constantly tearing it down. And we'll have a lot to say about particular tactics that people use when we get to generals where it's better recorded. Anyways, with that, we're ready to get into his reforms, unless you have any questions about that. Okay, so the census and how he reformed the way that this whole government worked. So rather than there being the 30 curiae, we're going to set up an entirely new system. And rather than it being a blood-based system, it is now going to be a wealth-based system. Understand, as a Roman citizen, how do you pay taxes? There's 2 ways that you pay taxes. One is you serve in the military, where you are expected to provide your own equipment and care for your own equipment. And then the second way is your tribe was required to pay tribute in times of war when they needed the funding. That's what taxes is. And so rather than it just being split up equally amongst these different 30 curiae, settling on the citizens however it does, he resets it up to make it wealth-based. And he breaks the Rome up into a bunch of different classes. So first, you have your equites, I don't know. These now are going to be people, notice how they rate their property. They rate it in terms of how many asses your property's worth. So, not in terms of silver or anything like that. Yep, they're still that far back that this is how they're conducting their census to see how much wealth you have.
Wow.
So if your wealth, the value of your wealth adds up to well over 100,000 asses, then you are going to be in the cavalry because you can afford it. Because horses are expensive and the equipment for cavalry are expensive. So you're going to be in the cavalry. You're expected to, again, arm yourself, take care of your horse, all that. It's all on you. And he made so that there were 18 centuries created this way.
What's a century?
A century is going to be 100 men.
Oh, okay.
So in other words, he's officially making there so that there's 1,800 cavalry in the Roman army. Now, when it came time to pay tribute, these guys were required to pay a very high portion of the tribute compared to everyone else. Huge portion of that responsibility fell on them. Next, he had your first-class citizens. This is anyone whose wealth was roughly 100,000 asses. This is going to be now the bulk of your heavy infantry. These guys are required to be fully armed, spear, shield, the whole shebang. At the time, Rome is using the phalanx formation. And so these guys, this is going to be the bulk of your guys organized that way, very heavily armed. Should have had a picture for the phalanx formation. You guys know what it is?
Yeah.
Yes and no? In particular, heavy armor, massive shield, and a spear. And you would get a bunch of them in rows with your spear sticking out. So from a bird's eye view, it would look like this. You'd have a box, all your guys tightly packed together with the spears, long spears sticking out like that. And so that's what a phalanx was. In the middle of your army would be phalanxes like this, marching against the other guy's army.
You needed multiple rows.
And it'd be multiple rows, so you would have, I think for the Greeks, I don't know what it is for these guys. I think for the Greeks, with Alexander, they got to the point where they had like 3 spears sticking out at the same time. Now all just jabbing at the enemy as the enemy's trying to get closer to him. So a bunch of shields with a bunch of spears sticking out, just stabbing him as you go. So middle of your army, that's going to be these guys. Since that's the heart of your army, we're going to need a bunch of them, 80 centuries or 80,000 troops that way.
That's awesome that the majority of the people were first class.
No. This is not the majority of your people. This is what each class is responsible for providing. So you're ultra rich. This guys right here, this would be like your 0.1%. These guys right here would be like your 1%. Your top 1% of wealth. And then these guys would be like your top 10% of wealth, or however it came out. I don't know the percentages, I'm making it up. But it's what you're required to contribute to the army. And he's organizing it by class rather than by organizing it by wealth rather than by blood.
So it's almost like punishing the wealthy. In a sense.
Right, this is, well, what this is largely seen as punishing, it's yes the wealthy, but it's also seen as coming after the aristocracy. Because before, it was largely up to the tribes to determine how these military things were going to be done. And your tribal connections are what's determining it, not necessarily your wealth. And the poor very much love this system because it's taking a bunch of the burden, the tax burden, off of them. I no longer have to dedicate a huge portion of my wealth to just maintaining the physical materials I needed for war. So, next class, those whose total property came to around 50,000. They were medium infantry, only had 20 classes of them. Moderate equipment, when it came time to tribute, they were still required to pay some, but not too much. Then you get your 4th class citizens. These guys are no longer phalanx type people. These are going to be your auxiliary troops, the ones who are throwing spears, throwing javelins. They're phalanx-ish. They can still fight in that formation, but they're going to be your very mobile troops. They're going to be the ones caught on the flanks almost. And then finally, down here, your 5th class citizens. And these poor guys barely have 11,000 asses in terms of their property. And these are just going to be your auxiliary guys, throwing javelins or throwing stones, your slingers, those types of guys. And it was very much the case that they were sometimes not even required to pay tribute when it came time to pay tribute. And then finally down here with the proletariat, the poor of the poor, the guys who can't even put together 11,000 asses for their property, they were not required to participate in war at all unless it was an emergency. But they still had 1 century designated to them, and they were completely exempt from paying tribute. Now, keep in mind, your military and your voting are the same thing. So while a huge financial burden is being taken off of the poorest of your people, they also are not going to be represented very much in the voting. If your equites and your first-class citizens can be in perfect agreement, between the two of them, they control 98 of the votes. That's already a majority. So when it comes to voting on something, if the top 2 classes are already in perfect agreement, that already decides the issue, and it doesn't really matter how all these guys vote. And so, while the proletariat are completely exempt from paying any sort of taxes, they also have almost no representation in terms of their vote. So, both the military and the voting. And this voting system persists through the entire Roman Republic. This is going to be one of their assemblies, the assemblies of the centuries. And it was weighted pretty much this exact way. Go ahead.
So is there a difference between their soldiers and their representatives? Or are those the exact same person?
Initially, there is no difference-ish, because they're not really soldiers.
They're just on reserve?
No, they're just your poor masses. The people who just don't have very much money.
I call them.
You can't really require them to perform in military service. I mean, we don't think it's strange to have a poor person join the military today because the government funds their equipment. These are all self-funded. These guys can't help in war. What are they going to do? They have no weapons. They're going to just find rocks and start throwing them?
Slingers?
Yeah, I was going to say, they already have those.
So, they are exempt from all military functions unless it's a huge emergency. And yet they still have almost no representation, but some representation. They get to put together 1 century when it comes time to vote.
But those centuries are the people who vote.
But the centuries are the people who vote early on. When we go down the road a little bit to the Roman Republic, this is no longer tied with the military anymore. And it's just that whoever shows up amongst the equites, they're organized into 18 groups. And however they vote is how they vote. And each group gets 1 vote. And when these guys show up, they're organized into their 80 groups. And when these guys show up, they're organized into their 20 groups. So initially, it's hand in hand with the army. It drifts away from that. And so the assembly of the centuries, this is still going to be a thing, fast forwarding in Rome 500 years. That is just how the different classes are now weighted.
Sounds like it worked.
Well, we'll see some of the problems that come up as a consequence of this. But, yes, it's part of the Roman Republic from here on out.
And
This way of voting.
This is the census.
The census is
This system.
they use the census to organize the system. The census is collecting your name and how much wealth you have, and determining what type of military service you qualify for and what kind of tribute you have to pay.
Okay.
So if I was the one conducting the census, I would go to your place, I would look at all your assets, and I'd say, you qualify to be a first-class citizen.
No, I don't.
And so you are required to maintain this type of military equipment for when you come to war, and you are required to pay this much in tribute for when we ask it, or whatever. Something to that effect.
Okay.
So, determining your taxes, determining your military service, and determining how much you get to vote. It's very much tied into the Roman way of thinking. This idea of being a citizen soldier. So, let's stress that for a second. So when it's all said and done, he organizes 193 centuries for a total of 1,900 troops that Rome will now support. Why does it only come out to 1,900? One of those centuries were the proletariat, which they're not required to fight, and then there were 2 other honorary ones that aren't worth mentioning how they fit into the picture.
Okay.
Now, you need, since there's a total of 193 centuries, you need 97 to have a majority vote. The equites, together with the class 1 citizens, give you 98 votes. So these still massively control politics. And even though we look at this as he's setting up a system where the top 1% of the population, in terms of wealth, pretty much gets to decide how the vote goes, this is still seen very much, he's very much loved by the common people and giving power to the common people. It tells you how the aristocracy must have been functioning prior to this and how they were making decisions. We don't know what it was, but he's very much seen as being an enemy of the patricians, the elites, with the way that he's setting up the system. Well, a huge part of it could be the way that he's doing the taxes and making them contribute that way. Now, give you some of the mentality of Rome for how they think, and hopefully this all makes sense now. If you had a vote in Rome, you were pretty much expected to fight and supply your own gear. You are a citizen soldier. If you're a citizen, you're a soldier, and if you're a soldier, you're a citizen. 1-to-1 correlation between those two things. And so it's only those who can serve that are ultimately given a vote, with the exception of the proletariat. Weird exceptions that almost don't matter. And notice that the weight of your vote is dependent upon how much you contribute. Can you contribute more as a soldier? Then your vote is worth more. And so there's also this type that political rights are earned through service. When we get to the Roman Republic, and we talk about their government, before you're even eligible for office, you have to have 10 years of military service. So you're not granted these rights. You have to earn your political rights through service. You don't get anything for free. There's some rights for free, but the more you serve, the more the system should serve you, so to speak. And so early on in Rome, the political elite, pretty much all through Rome, the political elite and the military elite are one and the same. Very strong correlation between those two things. There'll be exceptions, but for the most part, they're the same. Common saying, he who defends the state rules it. Roman would very much understand that saying. And then so although the military changes with the time, that assembly that I just showed you before persists pretty much all through Rome, all through the Roman Republic. So any questions about that census and how he reorganized everything? Massive change. So those are the Servian Reforms. Now getting back to his life and what he did. One of the things he does is he had fought a bunch of conquests. He established new land, particularly north of the Tiber. What Servius does with this land is he gives it to the public without ever consulting with the Senate. So that's kind of seen as a no-no, but the public, again, loves this man. So he gives these lands straight to the public without ever consulting the Senate. And at the same time, there's been these rumors throughout his kingship over and over again. Not really rumors, facts that people have kind of mumbled. He was never elected. He was never elected. He was never elected, right? He was just kind of appointed by his mom and took power that way. And so after he does this, and he's got the people loving him, he decides to make it official. And so in an attempt to make it official, he actually gets the assembly together and have them vote whether or not they want him to be king. Surprise, surprise, they say, we love you. Yes, we want you to be king. And so now he has been voted king by the assembly. He did not restart the process and start with the Senate the way he's supposed to, and have someone from the Senate recommend him to the Senate, get it approved by the Senate, and then be put before the assembly. He just went straight to the public assembly and had them vote. And they said yes.
So he skipped this.
So the Senate's mad at him because of what he's doing with the lands that he's conquering. And the Senate doesn't like how he's pretending this legitimacy to being selected when he skipped a huge part of the process. They kind of felt like under compulsion they put him as king, and now he turns around and skips over them and just gets the approval of the Senate to make him king. So, people love him, Senate not so much. Now we need to talk about some marriages gone wrong. So put a pin in him for a second and remind ourselves, remember he was worried that Tarquin's sons, the previous king, he was worried that his sons would come after him. So he married Tarquin's sons to his two daughters. So Tarquin's oldest son, Lucius Tarquinius, married Servius's oldest daughter, the elder Tullia. And Tarquin's younger son, Arnus Tarquinius, married the younger Tullia. They're very creative with their female names.
First name younger, last name Tullia.
Number one.
It's just largely coming after whatever their last name was. And so, who's Julius Caesar's sister? Julia, of course. He has two sisters? Oh, the elder. That too. So, not very creative with their naming. Now, Lucius Tarquinius, he's an extremely ambitious man. His wife, the elder Tullia, not so interested. His younger brother, not so interested. The younger Tullia, she's extremely ambitious. So you got ambitious and ambitious right here. They were pair drunk. They don't like their parent. They are very much aware of each other's ambition and very much love each other for it. And so they hatch a plan. You know how we can get married? We'll kill the people we're married to and get married. That's how. So she kills her husband, he kills her wife, and the two get married. And they start a very happy marriage. Now, this younger Tullia, she is a very Lady Macbeth type. And she is constantly in her husband's ear about how he needs to take control of the kingdom. Saying things along the lines of, are you the son of a king or the subject of a slave? Which one are you? Are you, as the son of a king, going to act like your father, or are you going to act like the brother I had to kill? He was so unmanly. What kind of man are you? I think Levy says something about not a night went by without her somehow bringing up the issue. So a very Lady Macbeth type trying to drag him to do something about this.
Yeah, that's toxic.
And so this toxic, lovely couple, they, being very prestigious people, just notice for a second. Tullia is talking her new husband against her father.
Yeah, that's weird.
That's who she's talking against. All right? Keep that in mind. He tied this all together in the family thinking it was okay. Apparently, she has some daddy issues. So the two of them, they're both in very high positions. The son of the previous king, the daughter of the current king. They start spreading all these complaints about Servius amongst the public, in particularly amongst the senators, trying to get support and trying to basically create grief for Servius. So what are the things that they're going around there saying about Servius and the types of rumors that they're trying to get spreading? One, they're pointing out that he is a slave, while Lucius is the son of a king. He's a slave because he's the son of a slave. So that's one thing that they're pointing out. The other thing they point out is that he was never actually legitimately elected. And he just put a show on it with the assembly after basically buying their loyalty. And that he never earned the kingdom. The kingdom was just gifted to him. And not even by a king. It was gifted to him by a woman.
This fulfills her own prophecy.
The wife of a king. How does she have any authority? No one elected her to any position. How does she just get to hand this over? Are you kidding me, guys? We're just going to go along with this? Next thing. He pointed out that he was undermining the aristocracy. He's making everything now about wealth versus blood. Just like his rich daddy did. Thinking he could buy stuff.
Why is it versus blood?
Because before it was the tribes and the aristocracy decided. We don't know the details on how that worked, but it is very much seen as he is stripping power away from the aristocracy.
I thought you were saying it was more like a meritocracy.
Compared to the world, it's a meritocracy. Compared to the United States, no.
Okay.
So your bloodline doesn't determine everything, but it still counts for a lot. There's still patricians here, and patricians still have lots of control, lots of power. It's still the case that only patricians can be appointed to the Senate, I think.
I see.
Next thing he says is he's exposing private matters. With the census now, everyone knows how much wealth you have. And he's generating this hatred of us wealthy people from the lower classes. Now they know how much better we have it than them. Because it's very public with the census where your wealth class lies and what the requirements were. Next thing they say, he's unjustly distributing the burdens of the state. He's making us wealthy people have to pay for almost everything now. And the poor people don't have to pay a single thing. There's people here that don't even have to pull their weight anymore. Next complaint is he says, he's kind of usurping power from all future kings. He just reset up the entire way that our whole government works and elections work. He's not functioning as a king. He's functioning as a revolutionary, setting up his own government that he wanted. And there were even rumors that Servius planned on stepping down from even being king and moving the government towards what would later become the Roman Republic-ish.
Once you have everything established.
Rumors that was going to happen. I don't think they're very credible, but nonetheless, rumors spreading that way. That he wants to do away with, with the whole kingship.
They have valid points.
So these are the points they're making, and you can see how people would start kind of, he's kind of got a point. He's kind of got a point. And so, as Servius Tullius aged, he's starting to be viewed as weaker and weaker by the senators around him.
Like
Physically weaker and weaker.
Yeah.
Huh?
Like a 7-day week or like physically?
More and more being 7-day-ish. It's Roman slang. You wouldn't get it. Okay. Anyways, so he's aging. He's getting past that point in his life where he's particularly physically threatening. And so once Lucius Tarquinius feels that he has enough Senate support, he calls a Senate meeting. So he calls for the senators to come meet. And while they're waiting to show up, he goes and he sits himself down right in the throne. And so now as the senators are walking into the Senate hall, they see he is occupying the throne. That's sending a pretty dangerous sign. Word gets out that this is happening. The king runs into the Senate house, basically saying, "What on earth do you think you're doing? You're not king, I'm the king." And so a fight breaks out. Lucius Tarquinius, he brought his supporters and he brought a little bodyguard with him. And so a fight breaks out there in the Senate hall. During the fight, Tarquinius actually throws Servius out of the Senate house. Physically picks him up and throws him out of the Senate house. Poor old guy. Throws him down the stairs, and he was pretty badly injured from the fall. From there on out, they drive the rest of the supporters of Servius Tullius out of the Senate hall, taking control of the Senate hall. Now, chaos, as news of this spreads throughout the city, chaos kind of starts breaking out. And you get some mobs building up, people fighting for either side, whatever's going on. Tarquinius, he sends assassins after the king, Servius Tullius. And so while Servius Tullius is fleeing the Senate house in some sort of injured state, the assassins of Tarquin end up catching up to him and killing him. And so that is the end of Servius Tullius. He's actually killed right there. When word gets out what's happening at the Senate house, the younger Tullia, the lovely woman, she gets her chariot driver and she says, "Take me to the Senate house as fast as you can." And so they rush over to the Senate house. And the first thing she does is she calls out to the king, recognizing Tarquinius as the king. First one to do that, say it in a very public way, that he's now the new king. Get the public talking about this thing. Things are getting so out of hand that Tarquin says, "Dear wife, please leave. You're going to get yourself killed." And so she turns around and she starts booking it home. In the process of booking it home, her driver notices her father there on the road. And so he stops the chariot. And when he gets out of the chariot, she takes the reins and she drives the chariot over her father's body. Shows you the kind of woman she is. Levy mentions that this is where the street gets its name, the Wicked Street. That would have been known in Rome at the time. The Wicked Street, that gets its name because here's what happened on that street. That's where lovely Tullia ran her father over with a chariot.
Wow.
And so with that, he's officially dead, if he wasn't dead before. The assassins didn't finish the job. And he ruled for a total of 44 years. We now have not Servius Tullius. We now have Lucius Tarquinius, I'll frequently call him Tarquin, is now the king of Rome, just took it by force.
Man, this is wild.
He killed them all.
Yeah, but why
Yeah,
does the
how-
Senate get a new one? It can't just be king.
Yeah, I have such a hard time
That's
seeing
so
how
hard.
people are just going with it. It's like,
Yeah,
right
they're
back
just
to-
going with it.
There's probably a lot of detail that we're missing.
We're missing a lot of detail. And on top of that, one of the things that tyrants do when they get control of a city is oftentimes they get the bodyguard and they take control of the city that way.
it's like, yeah.
Now, he already kind of has, in the mind of people, a legitimate claim to the throne. Understand, you got the wife of one, or the daughter of one king, and the son of another king. And he's been laying the groundwork for a long time in people's minds that this is a possibility. This could happen. It was very obvious that he was pushing to get the job. Anyways, so